The moment your throat tightens and your hand trembles over the sell button is precisely the moment I begin to look for my entry. Fear is the most expensive emotion on Wall Street, and you will pay for it coming and going. You will pay for it by selling at the bottom out of terror, and you will pay for it again by failing to buy at the bottom because you are paralyzed by that same terror. The market is a masterful instrument for gauging human weakness, and it rewards those who can stand apart from the stampeding herd and act with cold, calculating reason when all others have lost their minds. Do not mistake this for simple contrarianism. It is not about buying merely because everyone else is selling. It is about recognizing the specific, predictable character of a market climax born of pure, unadulterated panic. The average man does not want to be told it is a bull or a bear market. What he desires is to be told specifically which particular stock to buy or sell. He wants to get something for nothing. He does not wish to work. He does not even wish to have to think. It is too much trouble to think, and that is why he allows the professionals to do his thinking for him. But when fear takes hold, even the professionals can be swept away. The tape, what you now call your real-time quote feed, becomes a waterfall of red. Prices do not tick down, they cascade. There is no support, no logic, only a frantic race to the exit. This is not the time for analyzing price-to-earnings ratios or corporate balance sheets. Such things are luxuries for calm markets. In a panic, there is only one fundamental at play, the margin call. The selling is no longer discretionary, it is compulsory. And when selling becomes forced, prices become disconnected from all reality and valuation. They reflect only the intensity of the pain felt by those being liquidated. This is the moment the amateur is wiped from the board, his capital transferred to the man who kept his head. I learned this lesson most profoundly during the panic of 1907. I had been bearish for some time, seeing the strain in the credit markets long before the public felt the tremor. My accounts were heavy with short positions, and every downward lurch of the ticker tape added to my fortune. The decline was orderly at first, a logical repricing. Then the character of the market changed. The selling became frantic, desperate. I could read it on the tape as clearly as if the sellers were screaming in my office. These were not the transactions of informed bears pressing their advantage. This was the indiscriminate dumping of securities by men who were ruined, men who were being sold out by their brokers at any price available just to meet their obligations. Call money, the rate brokers charge for overnight margin loans, soared to 100%, then 150%. Credit, the lifeblood of the market, had frozen solid. This was the final stage, capitulation. In the midst of this chaos, I was not euphoric. I was observant. A market that is selling off due to panic is a market that is rapidly running out of sellers. When the last man who is forced to sell has sold, who is left to push prices lower? The selling pressure evaporates not because of good news, but because the fuel for the fire has been consumed. At the height of the turmoil, I received an unusual message. It was a request delivered by an intermediary from the great J.P. Morgan himself. He was assembling pools of capital to support the market, to provide the liquidity that was so desperately needed. My own heavy shorting was naturally contributing to the pressure. The message was polite but clear. For the good of the country's financial stability, would I consider covering my shorts? For an ordinary speculator, such a request from the King of Wall Street would be a command. But for me, it was the final, definitive signal. It was not Morgan's request that made me act, but what it represented. The most powerful financial force in the world was no longer letting the market collapse. He was actively intervening to support it. The line of least resistance, which had been powerfully down for months, was about to reverse direction with violent force. The risk was no longer in being long, the risk was in remaining short. So I did not merely cover my positions. I began to buy. I bought into the teeth of the panic, absorbing the shares being thrown onto the market by terrified, bankrupt men. I did not buy because prices were cheap. I bought because the selling pressure was exhausted and the most powerful buyer in the world had just shown his hand. While others saw only ruin, I saw the greatest buying opportunity of my lifetime. The public, driven by fear, had provided the bargain. My job was simply to have the courage to take it. This principle is not confined to once-a-generation panics. It appears in miniature during every sharp correction. Think of the Northern Pacific corner, when two financial titans, Harriman and the Morgan interests, fought for control of the railroad. They bid the stock up to $1,000 a share, and in doing so, they bankrupted countless traders who had been short the stock. Those unfortunate shorts were forced to sell everything else they owned, sound stocks, good stocks, to cover their catastrophic losses in Northern Pacific. I watched the tape as Union Pacific, a perfectly healthy and strong railroad, began to plummet. Why? Not because of any problem with the company, but because ruined men were dumping it to pay their debts. Their fear and their financial distress were creating an artificial, irrational price. I saw this, and I bought every share of Union Pacific I could get my hands on. When the Northern Pacific squeeze ended and sanity returned, Union Pacific snapped back, and I had another fortune. Fear is a contagion, but it often infects the wrong patient. Your job is to diagnose the source of the fear and determine if it is rational. If the selling in a good stock is caused by fear from an unrelated event, it is a gift. To trade on this principle, you must learn to recognize the anatomy of a capitulation bottom, the modern equivalent of what I read on the tape. It is not a subtle pattern. First, you will see a massive, climactic surge in volume. Look at your charts. The volume bar at the absolute low of a panic decline is often the largest bar in the entire downtrend. This is not professional selling. It is the public throwing in the towel en masse. It is the sound of thousands of small accounts being liquidated at once. Second, you will see extreme price movement. This often takes the form of a huge gap down at the open, followed by a reversal where the market closes near the high of the day. This is called a key reversal, and it shows that all the forced selling occurred in the morning, and by the afternoon, buyers, professional buyers, had absorbed it all and regained control. Third, the news will be at its absolute nadir. Every headline will scream disaster. Every television pundit will be calling for new lows. When the consensus is universally bearish and the emotional tenor is one of utter despair, you must become alert. Maximum pessimism often marks the exact bottom. Jesse Livermore consistently stressed that Wall Street extracts a heavy cost of instruction for every lesson learned the hard way. Fortunately, the core principles he developed to survive these expensive market penalties were captured for posterity by Edwin Lefebvre in the 1923 masterpiece, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It stands as the finest possible literary training ground, allowing you to absorb decades of painful operational experience without ever having to risk $1 of your own capital. To ensure this timeless wisdom translates accurately to the modern computerized arena, we advise seeking out the Max Davidson Annotated edition. Davidson's careful commentary is indispensable for bridging the gap between Livermore's era and ours. A link to this essential edition is provided in the description below. Understanding these historical precedents is not enough. You must forge this knowledge into a set of unbreakable rules. Your emotions will betray you in a panic, but your rules will not. Here are the laws you must follow if you are to turn fear into a generational buying opportunity. First, and most critically, never catch a falling knife. Wait for it to hit the ground and stop quivering. I did not buy into the 1907 panic while prices were still in freefall. I waited for the signal that the selling was exhausted. The intervention of Morgan, the change in the tape's character. You must do the same. Do not buy simply because a stock is down 20, 30, or 50%. Price alone is meaningless. You must wait for the price to stabilize. You must see the massive volume wash out. You must see the buyers begin to step in and absorb the selling. Buying into a panic is not a single action, but a process of observation and timing. You are waiting for the moment of exhaustion. Only then do you act. To be early is to be wrong. Second, you must differentiate between systemic fear and specific failure. My greatest successes came from buying sound enterprises that were being sold off in a general panic. I bought Union Pacific during the Northern Pacific crisis because Union Pacific as a business was unharmed. I bought the broader market in 1907 because the American economy, with Morgan's support, was not going to zero. If a single company is collapsing because of fraud or a failed business model, that is not a buying opportunity. That is a funeral. Do not stand at the graveside and try to buy the corpse. The fear you are looking for is widespread, irrational, and temporary. The fear you must avoid is the logical terminal decline of a failed entity. Your job is to buy healthy assets that have been temporarily mispriced by collective hysteria. Third, let volume be your ultimate guide. Price can be manipulated in the short term, but climactic volume is the undeniable footprint of the herd. When you see a stock decline for weeks on moderate volume and then suddenly collapse on a volume spike that is 5 or 10 times the daily average, you are witnessing the final act of capitulation. All the weak hands, all the margined accounts, all the investors who swore they would hold on forever, are being forced out in a single cataclysmic event. That spike in volume is the signal that the transfer of shares from weak hands to strong hands is occurring. After that volume climax, you must watch the price action. If the stock refuses to go lower on the subsequent days, even on bad news, the bottom is in. The sellers are gone. Fourth, you must cultivate the courage to act decisively. When the conditions are met, the volume climax, the price stabilization, the atmosphere of pure terror, you cannot hesitate. The reversal from a panic bottom is almost always sharp and violent. The easy money is made in the first few days of the rebound. This is not the time for committee meetings or second opinions. You must have your plan laid out in advance. You must know which stocks you want to buy, the market leaders, the strongest names before the panic began, and you must have the capital ready. Your mind must be clear. This is why I worked in isolation, away from the noise and opinions of other men. In the heat of a panic, their fear is contagious. You must inoculate yourself with your rules and your preparation. Courage in speculation is not reckless abandon. It is the calculated execution of a sound plan in the face of emotional turmoil. Finally, you must respect your own fallibility. Even when buying into a panic, you do not throw your entire capital into the fire at once. You begin with a probe. You establish a pilot position. You test the market. If you buy and the market immediately continues to plunge and takes out your stop, then your timing was wrong. You accept the small loss and wait. The market must prove your judgment correct. If you buy your initial position and the stock rallies, confirming that the bottom is likely in, then and only then do you add to your position. You pyramid your buys on the way up, financing your larger positions with the profits from your initial entry. You do not try to be a hero and call the absolute low to the penny with your entire account. You act as a prudent general, sending in a scouting party first before committing the main army. Fear is a commodity. The public produces it in vast quantities at the bottom of the market, and they will pay any price to get rid of it. They sell their best assets at fire sale prices just to make the pain stop. Your job is to be the sole buyer in that desolate marketplace. It requires a cold heart, a clear mind, and a deep understanding of market psychology. But if you can master your own fear and act rationally when others cannot, you will not just survive the panics that periodically cleanse the market. You will find that those moments of terror are the very foundation upon which great fortunes are built.